Hello and welcome to the Choralosophy Podcast. This is episode 66, I Shine, Music as Self-Care with Sarah Quartel. This is another installment of the Oxford series on the Choralosophy Podcast. So I had the joy and the honor and the privilege of chatting with Oxford Choral Composer Sarah Quartel in what was a very free and open and relaxed conversation, which I really appreciated. We kind of wandered around to a variety of topics, but we centered our conversation around the ideas of collaborating in a choral music space and its kind of unique superpower, if you will, its ability to build community, increase well-being, flourishing of the students, the singers and adults, children, everybody involved, and we grow as people. And it's not to say that choir is the only activity that allows this, but those of us who really understand what it's like to be in a choir, we all kind of agree that there's something special that happens in a choir. And so Sarah and I discussed that over the course of this episode. But like I said, we range. So we also get into the publishing industry a little bit, talking about how the sausage is made in the choral publishing industry. So stick around for that. There's also a discussion in there that you're going to probably be able to resonate with on the reality of what online school was like for kids over the course of this last year. And of course, you're going to want to stick around towards the end. You're going to see if I was able to successfully convince Sarah to join a choir again, because of course, that's one of my big things is I'm always telling more people should be singing. Grown-up choir teachers, go find a place to sing. So we talk about that as well. I think you're going to really enjoy this episode. But I do have some reminders, or I guess you could say some housekeeping announcements. On choralosophy.com, you can go to the main page there, choralosophy.com, and there's a tab at the top called The Show. And if you hover your mouse over The Show, all of the different subcategories of the show are there. And it's been 2 years now, so I've started collecting different series on the podcast. This Oxford series is one, which means that in that drop-down menu, you're going to see all the Oxford conversations plugged right in there. You're also going to see the COVID conversations. Hopefully, I don't have to keep adding more to those. Wink, wink. You're also going to see the choral music, a human art form, discussions of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I will continue to add conversations to that tab. There's also the Car Thoughts series now, which is where I'm just driving in my car, talking off my top of my head. And I've got a tab for that. And also the newest one, which is Student Perspective series, where I've had 2 choirs. Yes, the entire choir has been on the show in the last couple of months. And that is its own series now. And you can apply to be on it. If you would like to hear your choir appear on the Student Perspectives series, you can just email choralosophy@gmail.com and we will begin a discussion about whether or not that works and whether or not we can set that up. So check that out over at choralosophy.com. Okay, everybody, I'm here with Sarah Quartel, and Sarah is a composer, a choir director, a choral musician, and we're going to be talking about all kinds of things with her today about the experience. I think a really good centering point for our conversation today will be the way that choir connects us. And I know that that's a passion of yours, and that's one of my passions as well. So, Sarah, welcome to the Choralosophy Podcast.
Thanks so much, Chris.
I'm excited about this. And one of the things that I am interested in is just right off the bat, if you could just give me your background and for the listeners as well, who might not know who you are, what got you into choral music? And then from that, little Sarah stage to what you're doing now.
Well, it did really start with little Sarah. I grew up in a very musical household. My dad was a church organist. He built a harpsichord when I was a kid that lived in our basement. And to this day, I'm the only person I've ever met who grew up with a harpsichord right next to all the play toys down in the basement. But there was music in my house. There was choral music in my house. There was creativity in my house. And I think one of my earliest memories of being creative with music was listening to the hum of my mom's washing machine and singing little harmonies along with it to sing with this machine. So I think being creative with the building blocks of music was something I started doing on my own at a very young age. And I'm sure my parents saw that because they nurtured that with piano lessons and singing lessons and dance, which was not my favorite. but then they started me in choir, and it was just like magic. I say born a second soprano, die a second soprano. That's the voice placement I was given at age 10 in my awesome children's choir. And there was something about being that meaty middle supporting the melody, not being the melody, not being those lower notes, but having so much color in the middle that I just felt so useful, and something just really lit up inside of me.
Mm-hmm.
So I started writing music when I was a kid. I think I was 8 years old, and I wrote this little Christmas carol that won a competition in my hometown, and from there, I just kept experimenting on the piano, experimenting with voices. In my teen years, I did the whole singer-songwriter thing, teenager in the 90s, all of the emotive stuff that came out of that. And I
Do
played
any
in
of those songs still exist?
Oh, somewhere, there's fragments in my memory, and I'm sure there's cassette tapes all around my mother's basement of the little concerts I put on in my mom's living room when I was 16. That sort
Right.
of stuff.
Things that you would probably not want to see the light of day, or were you a pretty good little songwriter?
I had a decent following, I suppose, in my hometown. I don't know if I'd want to see the light of day now because I'm such an emotional writer. I think it would take me back to those tumultuous teenage years,
Right.
But yeah, I did that, and all the while receiving classical training in piano and theory and voice. And I hit 18, and all of a sudden, I'd wanted to be a performer. I'd wanted to do the singer-songwriter thing on the road, and I got struck with crazy performance anxiety. And but the music still had to come. I didn't want to stop creating. I didn't want to stop using my voice in that way. And so I turned to writing choral music because it had been something that had always been there for me my entire
Mm-hmm.
childhood, teenage years. And it was just natural. I started hearing more in what I was imagining in a piece than I could replicate myself. Harder stuff than I could play on the piano, more instruments than I knew how to play. And so the jump into choral music and composition for other performers happened around 18, 19. And that's when I wrote my first piece, Snow Angel, that continues to be one of my most popular pieces today. So yeah, fast forward, I did a theory and composition degree at university and loved every moment of that experience. And then I went into education after that and was a teacher for a while. And so my career has sort of, I started as creative little Sarah singing along with the washing machine, was a teacher for a while, and here I am back now full-time as a composer. I don't think I intended to be a professional composer. I sort of, my life just evolved into where I am here today, and I'm just loving every moment. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like sometimes that's the best way for things to happen to us.
Yeah.
Is to not force it too much, but just allow things to be.
Mm-hmm.
And it's an interesting thing because I get that question a lot because I do a lot of different stuff, and
Mm-hmm.
so I get that the question of how did you make that thing happen? And I'm like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Don't ask me to write a how-to because I just am going with the flow here. And if you'd asked me 4 years ago if I was going to be hosting a podcast as a part-time job, I would have never what is that
Yeah.
even? It's being open to where you are at that moment to do the things that you feel like you need to be doing right then. I think that's beautiful. And so let's talk about the teaching part of your life real quick. So I see here that you were an elementary school teacher?
I was, yeah. When I've done a lot of Zoom visits with children and youth choirs the past year, and I say, think back to your kindergarten to grade 6 music teacher. Who was that person? Well, that's what I used to do.
Mm-hmm.
I had 12 different pairs of funky shoes to keep children laughing. My hair was a different color every month. All these things you do in elementary music to engage your students, not just on a musical level, but on a personal level. And I think that's what I wanted to do as a teacher, was engage on a personal level, because that's what music had done for me as a kid.
Yeah.
It had captured my heart and soul. It had given me mentors. It had given me goals. And working at a tiny little rural school in Southern Ontario, I wanted to bring something to those kids that maybe they hadn't seen before.
Mm-hmm.
And bring connection to them, to each other, and help them realize that music can do that.
Now, in that elementary position, then was that where you were? Was that more of a general music curriculum, or was it a choral music setting?
It was a general music curriculum, but
Okay.
I infused it with choral music making at
Right.
any point I could.
Mhm.
Getting my grade 6 boys singing in rounds. Some of these kids had never sung before, and to suddenly teach them what their voices could do, it was really great.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's an amazing age. I did as part of my practicum when I was young, uh, an elementary school placement. We were all required to in my state. We had to do an elementary and a secondary as part of our certification. And I knew that I wanted to work with the older kids. I always wanted to be high school, and I've been doing high school ever since. But I remember having this very snobby attitude about elementary school teaching when I was young, and thinking, well, if I'll do this because I have to do it to get a grade. If I ever had to teach elementary school music, I would just not teach music, and I would just go work for my dad. That was my
Mm.
attitude at the time. But after that practicum of working with the kids that age, my tune completely changed. I still wanted high school, and I still wanted to do that, but my attitude about it changed to the point where, what, if this was the job that I was offered, I could do this. This is really, really fun, because what I found about kids at that age versus high school is, if any of my high school kids are listening to this, don't take it the wrong way. But what I find at the end of a day teaching high school is that I am drained of energy, because it
Yeah.
takes my energy to make them motivated to do stuff. Whereas with elementary school kids, it was almost the opposite. They feed me energy, because they come in wanting to impress me. They come in wanting to get my approval.
Mm.
Whereas with high school kids, it's kind of the opposite. The opposite. They make you earn it, like with
Mm.
every little thing that you
Mhm.
say and you do. So that's an
Mhm.
interesting thing. That how many years did you do that?
I was 5 years at one school and then did some piecemeal work after that as I moved around the country. But basically, I've been in and out of classrooms for about 10 years. And I
Mhm.
still am a substitute teacher on my local school board because I can't stay away. I
That's
still
cool.
love doing that. So
Yeah.
sometimes kids will get me, and it's a blast to still
Right.
go in. Yeah.
Right. So would you say that most of your composition work is for that age group? I know you've done some commissions for children's choirs. Is that where you like to focus? Describe how you work in that way.
Yeah, I write for all ages, all voice types. Having grown up in a treble voice choir and then singing in excellent women's choirs in university and beyond, that's sort of been my specialty is writing for treble voices, both young and more mature voices. And when you're a professional composer and people sing one piece of yours, that's SSAA, who's going to commission you? Well, more people who have the same kinds of choirs that you've already written for. So I've kind of gotten in this cycle of a lot of my commissions go to children's choirs because that's what I've started with in the past. But no, I write all sorts. I just did an 8-part piece for the new Dublin Voices in Ireland, and I'm branching out more and more. Yeah.
That's awesome. That's very cool. What's that 8-part piece like? What's it about?
It's setting a poem by a living Irish poet named Joan McBreen, and it's called The Island Itself. So it's about this gorgeous, small little spit of an island off of Ireland, and you can get to it by vehicle once a day when the tide is out. And it's about the sea rack and the waves. And so you've got lots of undulating voices and a lot of neat texture, kind of a cappella choir style. I worked with Rioton a few years ago and wrote a piece for them and really studied how their composers, how you see how Mia Makarov build pieces for them. And so they've been a huge influence. And when I'm writing for a cappella 6 to 8-part voices, I sort of go back to what I heard from them, and a lot of that has influenced that sort of writing in me.
Right. Yeah, that's wonderful. So with your commission process, I one of the notes that I see here, which I'm really intrigued by, is that
Mm.
you've done several where you ask the choirs themselves to do some reflecting before you finish or create the piece. And it's a part of this idea today for us to talk about how we connect each other and connect to each other through choral music. Is that an idea that you had because it like the buy-in that the singers would then have afterwards? Is it almost as if they helped create it? Is that where that comes from?
When I think back to my time, as a child and a teenage choral singer, I think of those relationships that were built then. Hearing one voice on this side and one voice on the other side of you. I still remember where Anna stood when I was 12, because I can remember where her voice was. And you remember those people next to you. And I also remember my choral directors putting music in my hands that had a story, that had deeper context, whether it was quite explicit in the text, or how the music made you feel, what kind of images it made you feel, or how we discussed it as a choir with our director. It was always about finding greater meaning and finding greater connection with the piece, because in the philosophy of the people that I've studied with over the years, that makes for a better performance. Intonation is better when you feel that emotion and you lift with the phrase rather than sitting heavy. All of these technical things that we strive for in a technically beautiful performance. My choral director said, well, it has root in how you connect with the piece and connect with each other, and how you achieve that as a group. So my idea to ask singers to share their thoughts with me came from probably in part, my history as a singer-songwriter type, and having that emotive, connected type of writing, but also wanting to give, in a commissioning scenario, choirs something that they feel connected to. Yes, meet the technical specifications that they require, understand the difficulty level, understand, themes for where they want it to fit in their program year, but also something that they can have a relationship with that feels like theirs. So I did this, and my first time doing this was with a small choir from a rural town just outside of my hometown, West Lorne, Ontario, the Troublemakers. And these ladies, they were great. And their director came to me and asked if I would write for them. And when I found out where they were, I said, oh, I think my husband's grandmother lives in that town. She's, Mary? Oh, I know Mary, So it was this incredible sort of moment when I'm writing for a group of people that already know my extended family. And so what I did is I drove down to that town with my husband, and we saw the sights. We saw the cornfields, we saw the marina, we saw the community center, we saw all of these places where these women lived and worked and existed. And then I asked them, what does your community mean to you? This is where you sing. This is where you have raised your children. What does this place mean to you? And I got the most profound responses, so much wisdom, so much grace in what these women had to say about their lives and their experiences. And I was inspired by that, and that formed the basis of the text to my piece, I Remember.
Great. That's awesome. And so how would you describe that process once it got to the first performance of that? And you mentioned earlier that, the connection that then follows into the performance because the singers are involved and they're part of the creation process. How would you describe that moment?
I'd see 80-year-old women with tears in their eyes,
Yeah.
you know,
Hmm.
and 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 I was just bowled over. Like I set out to connect with them, and then leave the piece as theirs to do with what they want. That's kind of one of my philosophies as a composer. I create something that I love and that I feel connected to, but when I release it into the world, I'm not particular about every breath has to be exactly here. You have to interpret it exactly the way that I heard it, but it was theirs, and they created their own story. You could hear it, you could see it in their eyes, hear it in their voices as they sang it. And it's been one of my biggest sellers. And every year on Facebook, their director posts, so it's the anniversary of us commissioning Sarah and this piece, and we're so excited about it. It remains theirs, and it will remain theirs forever.
Right. Now, are you one of those? I'm assuming just because it's now the norm in composer world, but you
Mhm.
obviously write some things, and Oxford publishes them. You are, but probably published at other places too.
Well, I started out self-publishing. I printed all my stuff myself at Staples and folded it in the back of my husband's pickup truck. I remember I was going to South Korea one summer for the International Choral Symposium. I think that's what it was. And I remember I hadn't ordered a mail out right before I hopped on my plane in Toronto, and I'm folding scores in the back of a Ford Ranger, trying to get them all stuffed into envelopes and into the mail. So I did the whole self-publishing thing, and then I went to PDFs, and I haven't really published with anybody else. And I started with Oxford in, I believe, 2013. They published my first piece. And in 2018, they approached me and said, hey, we'd like to publish you exclusively. Would you sign an agreement with us that I will be theirs forever and they will support me to the ends of the earth, which they do. They're just absolutely amazing. And so I publish exclusively with Oxford now.
Oh, I see. All right. So does it, because I know nothing about your end of things. So that doesn't mean though that like once you sign on with a company like Oxford, do they retroactively then publish your stuff that was already self-published, or is it just everything you write from that point on?
Everything from this point on, they have
Gotcha.
first right of refusal, and then everything I've written up until now, I've offered them, and they've taken. So yeah.
That's very cool. That's very cool.
Is.
That's always such a fascinating thing. From my perspective, it's like not knowing how the sausage is made most of the time.
Yeah. It's funky. You get in there and people ask me, if you weren't a composer and weren't a teacher, what would you be? I'd probably be an accountant. I just love it when all the numbers add up and see the intricate workings of things. I love the business side of this. So I actually love the publishing process and knowing all the people in score design, and all of this. It's just been a fascinating relationship for me to see how a big established publishing house works.
As this episode comes out with Sarah in early May of 2021, the school year is getting ready to end for many of us, which means that we are starting to look ahead to next year, hopefully what will feel like a normal and fresh start of a year. So that means that the affiliates on this show that put their name behind me on the YouTube channel there and put their name on my website and support the show, they need your support too when you're thinking about retooling your classroom for next fall. That means Sight Reading Factory memberships, which every single year when you renew for you and all of your kids, you can enter Choralosophy at checkout and get 10% off. That's big. Same thing with mymusicfolders.com. Every time you head there to get new folders for the year, new choir robes at mychoirrobes.com, that's another site you can use the Choralosophy checkout code. And then, of course, there's going to be sheet music when you come back to school. And that means, in addition to the great composers from the Oxford series, you're going to want to hit up graphitepublishing.com, ryanmain.com, again, both of which you're going to get 10% off your entire purchases every time you use Choralosophy at checkout. Last but not least, there is vocevistavideo.com/Choralosophy, and you can get access for free to their software and download it, play with it for 30 days. And then when you love it, it's a $99 purchase. You will get 10% off again when you use that Choralosophy promo code. Now that one, if you're not teaching your kids about resonance in a scientific way, you run the risk of them being confused as what resonance is. So check out Voce Vista software. And also there's several episodes on my feed throughout the last couple of years where I kind of explain how it goes. If you are wanting me to point you directly towards some of those explanatory episodes, I can do that really quickly. Just shoot me an email at choralosophy@gmail.com. All right, everybody, now back to Sarah. Yeah. I'm learning more about it, of course, through the show, because, of course, I have this collaboration now with Oxford, trying to get stories for people like you out there. And but also I have affiliations with a self-publisher, Ryan Main, and then with Graphite, and that's its own separate kind of thing within the publishing world. So I'm starting to see a little bit more of the sausage factories from the other side of things, which is really good. So don't you have another commission coming up soon too, with like the National Children's Chorus? And tell us about that.
So that's something that has happened throughout the pandemic. They commissioned me before the pandemic to write a piece for their most accomplished treble choir. And of course, they've got chapters in New York City, in LA, in San Francisco, in Washington, DC. And so it's this incredible organization where kids from around the United States sing with their friends in their hometown, but then there are these opportunities, for these larger concerts in LA and in New York City. So their artistic director, Luke McIndarfer, came to me and asked if I would write a piece for them. I said, absolutely. And then pandemic hit, and sort of things just, the world slowed. I remember March 2020, as I don't think I did anything, but I did a lot at the same time. It was just this huge slowdown. So as he and I continued to discuss what the parameters of the piece would be, things morphed as his choir went online, and they went online, I think, fairly quickly. And I said, well, then how can I use the fact that you've got all these kids connecting with you online to connect with them myself and ask them how they're doing? What's life like these days? And so I did the same thing I did with other choirs in the past. And I posed questions to these kids. Being younger, I didn't leave it open-ended. I asked them, how does singing in your choir help you care for other people? How does it help you show kindness? How does it help you show empathy? And then I said, well, how does singing in your choir help you care for yourself? Show kindness and empathy to yourself? Because as an educator, and you'll likely have seen this too, kids carry so much.
Oh,
I
man.
worked with so many kids over my career that I hadn't seen half of the stuff that they'd already experienced, and I have lots of friends who are high school educators that tell me that they see increased level of anxiety and depression in their kids. And I knew that for some of my students, their safest place was in the music classroom. And so I really wanted to connect with kids during this unprecedented time and get them reflecting on music as self-care and the joy that is available in choral music making, the connection. And the responses I got back, we're so thoughtful, we're so eloquent, we're silly, we're funny, we're goofy. I got everything from I feel like I shine when I sing in choir. And I actually took that passage, I shine, and I made a whole cascading section in their piece saying I shine.
Mm-hmm.
And I sing to my mom when she's not feeling well and doesn't want to make supper, like all this stuff that kids come out with. And that's how I help her, and it was just a beautiful experience to hear their thoughts and realize that I need to get back singing in a choir.
Mm-hmm.
I talk about all the magic that singing with people can give to you. And I'm like, why don't I sing in a choir right now? So if they inspired me to get back to singing when it's possible again.
Right. So through that process, I'm assuming, was that like a series of Zoom meetings? Like how does that, during the pandemic, how does this happen?
Yeah, it started out with Zoom meetings, and then I told them what I was going to be asking them and have them reflect on that. And then I sent them just the written questions, so they, in their own time, with any supports that they wanted to, could write down their answers, send them to the organization, and the organization compiled them. And I've got this gorgeous spreadsheet of all these little thoughts by these beautiful little people that I get to hold on to forever and cherish.
Now, are you, slight aside here, but now are you one of those people who really enjoys spreadsheets?
Yes. Charts and graphs. My husband says, ooh, charts and graphs. She loves it. Yeah.
I can only trust you to a point now, because spreadsheets make me very nervous. I don't know what it is.
Color coded. Ooh, yeah. Yep.
Yeah. I've known people like you before. I've got my eye on you.
We exist. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So, okay. So let's kind of dig into this a little bit more than of just, I guess, big picture of what this project was like, because you mentioned these aspects of self-care, anxiety, depression, all the things that kids, like you said, are carrying so much. In what way, or in what ways, were you hoping to contribute to that for the kids? And what were some things in this piece of music that really became, I guess, maybe little emotional babies for you as you were creating this piece?
Yeah. I started with wanting to marry the inspiration from their text, which, I wrote that part of the lyrics, with a quote from Julian of Norwich: all shall be well, and all manner of things shall be well. And I thought, when you're saying that in spring of 2020, it kind of became a little mantra to me. All shall be well. All shall be well. And when you really repeat those words over and over again, it's not saying everything will be perfect. It's not saying everything will be exactly what I want and exactly how I've envisioned. It won't be. The difficulty will still be there, but with courage and strength and a support system, I can find wellness. I can find strength through this. And so I've used those words directly in the text. The first opening line is all shall be well. And it's got this cascading part where the lower voices hold this all shall be well, all shall be well. And then the other voices kind of echo it. So as you're saying it, you're kind of pondering, what does this mean? And I almost wanted to put those words in the kids' mouths. I remember poetry I had to memorize as a kid. And when you really started to think about it, you're like, oh, wow, this is really neat, that you wouldn't necessarily have analyzed it in the same way you did if you were just reading it out loud once. But when you really know something and you're repeating it over and over again, you see what it means to you, how it means different things to different people. And hopefully repeating that over and over in this piece will at least provide opportunity for reflection in a choral rehearsal led by a conductor. And I know Luke is, who cherishes the singers and who values the relationships that those singers build with him and with the organization. When you say that over and over again, you kind of sink into it. And I guess I wanted the kids to see little flashes of what they'd written too in this piece. I didn't use much word for word from their reflections, but you can see the little imprints of these kids all through this piece, and how it builds from this sort of telling yourself all shall be well, or telling somebody else all shall be well, to this part where you're sharing your song, and then you get that I shine part where you've kind of taken it on, and all shall be well, and I'm just shining in this knowledge that we're moving forward. I'm going to make it.
Yeah. What amazing timing for a project like that too.
Yeah.
Where it obviously, when you took that commission, that wasn't what you had anticipated probably it would be.
No.
But then it turns into this very kind of timely, almost it sounds like many therapeutic opportunities for the kids and maybe even for you during that time.
Yeah, I think it was definitely therapeutic for me. I selected as a choral director, as an educator, I selected my repertoire with intention. I used to call my program character education through music, and it was important to me what lyrics my kids were singing and what messages they got out of it. And so I hope now, with this piece, and in general with what I write, that teachers and conductors can find messages in it that can connect with the choral singers and provide some comfort when needed.
Yeah, absolutely. I know that I'm just kind of reflecting myself here on that time, because my students are in person now again.
Mm-hmm.
But of course we were completely virtual for 10 months,
Wow.
9 months maybe. And one of the things that I noticed during that time, and of course this is not an original observation to me, many people have made this observation, but just the sheer magnitude of the depression and anxiety going on in kids during that time when they were isolated for that period of time. And I think one of the things that I noticed, at least from talking to kids during that time, the few that would turn on their cameras and actually talk to me,
Mm-hmm.
it was there's this phenomenon that happens, like when you're in a classroom, like choir classroom or math classroom, or it doesn't matter what it is, and something's hard, something academically is hard. When you're sitting in person with everyone else, you can kind of glance around and notice that this is hard for everybody. Like, this is a really tough concept.
Yeah.
But
You
when
can
you're
read
when you're by yourself in your own room and staring at the screen and you're seeing something hard, they started to take on this sense of, I'm an idiot.
Oh.
because you can't get that feedback, that verbal cue from someone else. They started to assume that they were the only ones who were not getting it.
Oh.
Because when you sign out of the meeting, they don't see the process that their other kids are going through, the work that it takes to be
Mhm.
in school. And when you're that young, my goodness, almost a year off of seeing that. So I have never seen um, so many kids who think they are bad students
Wow.
now, like
Wow.
almost to the point where I can see as a teacher, it's going to take a couple of years at least to repair that damage with some kids,
Yeah.
which is remarkable. And so I think it's pretty amazing that you got to be in that situation with kids during that time, because most kids didn't get to have an opportunity like that where they got to feel like they were creating art,
Mm.
creating something meaningful. And my goodness, that's amazing that you got to do that.
Yeah. I've been very fortunate to connect with a lot of choirs, particularly um, high school age choirs over the last year, and it has deepened my appreciation for what high school music teachers do on a daily basis to what they have done the past year to keep their kids going. And it's been pretty special. I will cherish a lot of the relationships I've built with choirs just over Zoom. Laughing. I got one of the kids asked me last week. I was Skyping with a choir from Texas, and she goes, "Okay, Ms. Q, tacos or burritos?" And just that there's joy and there's fun and these kids can open up and have a good time still as they're connecting with people online. I will cherish these memories for sure.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm just going to zip back to something you said earlier,
Sure.
that it just popped it back into my head of you asking the question, why don't you still sing in a choir? And I wonder, after this last year, do you do you see that as, or I guess I should say it this way, are you feeling that pull now more just because because we've all been isolated and there's been less singing going on? Is that something you could get back into?
Absolutely. It's fully my intent that as soon as I can, and I know which choir I'm going to join in my hometown here, it is something that I think, with feeling like, with the absence of a voice that we've had in this last year, isolated, that singing is, the song, "How can I keep from singing?" How? I have an arrangement of that, and I've said it almost exclamatory. How can I possibly keep from singing with so much beauty, with so much joy, with so much that I want to celebrate? How can I possibly keep from singing? And that's sort of the emotion that's come up in me this past year, is that I can't wait to be a part of this again, to be a choral musician. And as from a composer standpoint, some of the best choral composition education I've had in my life is singing in choirs. And because I just naturally analyze everything that's put in front of me, any score that's put in front of me, I'm analyzing as I'm singing in choir. I learned so much.
Hmm.
And so, to always keep myself fresh as a composer, plus to remind myself of the medium that I'm writing for, to remind myself the people that it's for, to remind myself, when I get caught up in worrying about sales numbers, or how many people are going to pick this up, or who am I writing for? Well, mostly I'm writing for community choirs of people who do it for the love of singing, and to be able to sing beside those people. I can't wait.
Hmm. Yeah, you mentioned that people who sing for the love of it. It's actually I'm a words nerd, linguistics
Hmm.
nerd, and etymology nerd, and one of the things that I lament is the fact that the word amateur has been turned into something that we think of as less than,
Yeah,
when it
yeah,
really just means for the love of
yeah.
someone who does something for the love of it is an amateur.
Hmm.
Um, and we don't use that word that way anymore.
No, you're
And
right.
I like the idea, the imagery of how that word would describe an amateur singer, meaning just somebody who wants to sing. They don't need to do it for their job.
Hmm.
And as a teacher, that's what I try to get across to kids, is very much I have a singing is for life kind of philosophy through my education, the things I teach in class. Like, this is something you can do forever. I want you to be really good at it, though, so that you could become a professional singer if you wanted to, but that you'll feel so accomplished when you do it that even if it's not your job, you would feel like you could contribute to a local community choir, to your church choir. You would feel like, hey, I have a skill that I built when I was in Mr. Muntz's class.
Mm.
and I'm going to go contribute that skill to my church's baritone section or to the community choir. Like I really believe that we need more of that.
Yeah.
So it's great when teachers and composers model that, I think, by singing in something that
Yeah.
you have in your hometown.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. One of the things that I'm excited about right now is that I am my student choirs are 2 weeks out from our first live performance.
Wow.
They get in over a year. They get to each have two family members come,
Wow.
and so we've gone through our performing arts center, which we're so fortunate where I am. I have a 1,000 seat auditorium
Amazing.
at the high school, and so social distancing is easy. It's really easy. I can go in and I can tape off little sets of 2 seats, and it's been kind of awkward because I've had to tell the parents, I've had to say, mom and dad are divorced. I'm sorry, you're going to have to sit next to each other because
Yeah.
it'll throw off our distancing. It's got
Yeah.
to be, 2 sets of 2. But
Yeah.
the parents are so excited to get a chance to come and hear their kids again, and the kids are really nervous, and it's almost as if all of the taking for granted that what we got to do is gone. Now
Mm.
it'll come back. We'll take it for granted again at some point. But right
Yeah.
now there's kind of like this beauty that's happening with the choirs that get to sing and the choirs that are getting a chance to sing to their family members again. And
Mhm.
that kind of thing for the first time after a year. I really do anticipate some beautiful moments. And with my adults that I work with, the professional singers that I work with, I'm
Mhm.
programming their first concert in well over a year right now. And that means I'm like, YouTube searching, and I'm PDF searching, and I'm catalog searching again, and for like trying to envision a program,
Mhm.
which I haven't done that in a year. And it's like I'm hanging out with an old friend. It's the coolest thing.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's lots
Yeah.
of fun. It's
I
lots of
tend,
fun. Go ahead.
yeah. I was at the ACDA conference recently, the national conference. So I had a piece being performed by Montgomery High School, and I was watching the chat. You're watching the concert online, and people are chatting on the scroll there. And somebody said it's just amazing to see, one of the videos had a choir without masks on, space, but without masks on, and people are just marveling. Faces without masks, singers without masks, and
Uh-huh.
how much joy that brought, and that hope that it's not gone forever. And you're right, we'll take it for granted again, but um, that we're all just so excited. So I'm so excited for your students that they get to perform
Yeah.
coming up. Congratulations!
Yeah, I'm
That's so
pumped. It's going to
great.
be fun. It's going to be
Wow.
fun.
Yeah.
It's funny, with one of my kind of, I guess you could say, my elite group at the school, my chamber choir,
Mhm.
got to do a little performance back in October, when cases were low, and then we kind of shut everything down for a while. And then, but I had kind of an equity problem with that. Like I was, only my top kids got to sing,
Yeah, that's tough.
because they limited the number so much that was who was on campus and that's who was able to come. But this one is for the first time in the whole school year, all the kids, and I'm so pumped about that. So yeah, I'm excited.
That's
Uh,
great.
so let's shift gears just a little bit after we've been reminiscing and whatnot, and
Mhm.
I'm interested in hearing about some of the projects that you've got. The National Children's Chorus Commission, and they're getting ready to sing. We talked
Yeah.
about that. What about any kind of upcoming publishing projects or things that we could go look for from Sarah Quartel in the near future as our choirs
Yeah.
come out of hibernation?
Absolutely. One of the most exciting projects I've worked on in the past year is acting as an editor for a new compilation of SATB unaccompanied works by living women composers, published by Oxford University Press. It's called Breath of Song. And in addition to my own work in the book, there are pieces. We've got a new one from Joan Shimko, one from Eleanor Daly. These are women that I studied in my path to be where I am today, and to have the opportunity to edit their work and compile these 10 pieces to be released. It's been tremendous. And so that publication is, I believe it's out now, and I got to do a presentation on it at ACDA, and there's a lot of exciting sounds out there right now, and we're already looking to how how we can continue to release more work by women composers who are starting out, who are established, and just really share that repertoire that exists.
So that first book of 10 could become
Mm-hmm.
a series where there would be a book 2 potentially someday.
Potentially, here's to
Yeah,
hoping. Yeah. This is
right.
all for SATB voices, and we know that there's also a big demand for upper voice music too. So
Hmm.
that's a thought. Yeah.
That's very cool. And are there books of is your music in those books as well, or are you just the editor?
Yeah. I have one piece in that book called "The Bird's Lullaby." And then of my own work that's coming out, Oxford is releasing this spring and summer 2 Sarah Quartel songbooks. I guess I've got enough I've got enough rep with them now that they can make books of my music. So I have a book of 10 SSAA pieces coming out, 10 pieces for treble voices, and also 10 pieces for mixed voices. Some of them, the Quartel groovy greats, pieces that have been around for a few years and done well, and some new things added in there too.
That's awesome. Yeah,
Yeah.
and if there's any, I guess, particular information about those pieces that you want me to include, I can put in the show notes and stuff too, just
Sure,
as
sure.
so that way
Yeah.
sometimes people, that's the thing about podcasts, they are not timely.
No.
So somebody might come across it a year from now.
Mhm. Mhm.
And they're not necessarily the breaking news of the moment.
Mhm.
They kind of
Mhm.
become permanent
Yeah.
out there.
Yeah.
So that, yeah, I can always link those things.
Sure.
Here at the end of our conversation here, I'd like to put you on the spot just a little bit.
Go for it. Tacos or
Um,
burritos again? No.
what's that?
Tacos or burritos again, like I've been asked recently. Yeah.
Right.
Uh,
So, all right. So here's a thought experiment, and
mhm.
then you can kind of respond. So let's say you're asked to give a presentation at a convention, right?
Mhm.
And let's say it's, and it doesn't count if it's something you've ever actually presented, but something you wish you could get up in front of choir teachers and choir people and choral singers, and if you had that opportunity to talk to them about a topic and dig into a topic, what would it be and why?
Oh, you know what? This just came to, improvising with your singers,
Ooh,
improvising with your students and your kids. And I would want to improvise with a room full of people. And maybe, I would say, okay, everybody over here, you've got this part of the melody, you're going to do this over and over again, and we're going to do this, and just sort of build a fun little soundscape with a room full of people to sort of demystify being creative with musical structures, with these building blocks that you too can use music in a creative and compositional way. I know so many teachers are scared to compose with their students because it's so daunting and it can be such a huge thing, but it's not as as scary as it may seem, and I'd love to connect with teachers on that and try that together.
you know what? I love that answer. I can respond with a story from my own teaching practice
Mm.
where I am aware that my kids should be improvising more,
Mm.
meaning they don't. But I've always been aware of it, and there's been a few moments in my classes over the years. I've been teaching high school level for 18 years now, so there have been
Yeah,
lots of kind of, just like anything, there are things that are my routines and
yeah,
things that I'm comfortable with, but there's this improvisatory thing which I just don't have that in my musical background. But there was one day in my men's choir, mostly freshman boys, um, where I just decided to sit down at the piano and start playing a chord progression, just kind of on
mm,
loop over and over and over. And as part of our warm up that day, I just asked them to start singing. And of course,
right.
they were confused for a while. That sing what?
Yeah, yeah,
I don't care. Start singing. And I just kept playing the chord progression. And one by one, like one brave boy would start just making noises, and then other thing. And by the time they were done, like everybody was just having a blast. And
yeah.
what's interesting about that though is, even though I'm cognitively aware that that's something I should give the kids a chance to do more, it's not my comfort zone. So I have to make myself do it. And so you're going to be
Mhm.
inspiring me to
Oh,
go do that next week. Like tomorrow when I go back to class,
awesome.
I'm going to do improvisation with the
I'd
kids.
love to hear how it goes. Yeah, let me know.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Well, thank you so much for spending your time with me this afternoon and adjusting the schedule. I was able to get my son's baseball team drafted this afternoon. So
great.
That helped a lot.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thanks, as always, for sticking around to the end of an episode. On the way out today, I'm going to shout out the producers over at Patreon: Ulrika Igrain Munoz Alarcon, Chandler Smith, David Kowalczyk, James Mock, Kyle Peterson, Michael Herron, Ryan Main, Steve and Kathy Kakachik. You can join this list of producers by joining the Patreon and choosing that producer tier. And there are some benefits to doing that. You would have the access to the private podcast feed, which is when I say what I really think. And you will also have some access to some lesson plans and materials that I've created over the last couple of years, as well as advance notice of who's coming on the show, with a chance to kind of put bugs in my ear about what you think I should ask them and those types of things. There's also some cool swag. There's a t-shirt, there's the great Choralosophy hat, right? So there's all kinds of things you can do. But you know what? To be honest, most people go over there just because they're throwing me a tip every month, because this show's hard work and you get something out of it. If you're still here listening at the end of the episode, that means you're getting some kind of value out of the show. So I hope you'll do that and go join that Choralosophy group over on patreon.com/Choralosophy. We're getting close to one of our first goal tiers over there. I think we need about 5 more people to join to hit our first goal of 75. So that would be awesome if you would do that. And then, of course, if you can't quite make that commitment, the things that also really help are just liking, sharing, hitting subscribe buttons, leaving ratings, going into the Apple Podcast app and leaving some kind of comment or rating. All these things help people see the show. So if you are willing to do any of those things, I am super grateful. But until next time, keep listening and keep thinking deeply about choral music and our art form.